to fight for our families, for the citizens of Franklin County, but yet has been known to make plea deals with the criminals and let murderers walk free. When I met him, he told me, "We are not CSI." When I asked why no fingerprints were taken, when I questioned things, he didn't even know the witness's name and kept saying the wrong name, and it appeared like he had never even read the files. And then I go from seeing that this man that he knew stabbed my son to death was facing second-degree murder charges to being told that there was nothing they could do because everybody told a different story. And then I asked for the case files, and I saw for myself what was said, and it is unbelievable the lies that are told and the evidence that is right in front of you, all denied. We cannot allow this in Franklin County. Our children's lives matter. Our family members' lives matter. There are other cases. Ken Allen, Jeff Winehouse, Darrell Johnson, Cassidy Hutchins, just to name a few. We have to stand up, Franklin County, and fight for justice. We have to fight for what is right. We cannot allow this prosecutor to get away with what he is doing. Please don't wait till something happens to someone you love. Please help us and get involved in this and fight for what is right.
On January 10th, 2016, my nephew, Austin Lusty, had his life taken at the young age of 24. He left behind a 2-year-old son. Austin, according to the autopsy, was stabbed through his vocal cords and in the left upper lobe of his lung. My sister, I guess about 3 months went by and she was never called by the victim's advocate, which was Jamie Pageant at the time. Nobody from Bob Park's office ever called. She actually had to start calling them, and numerous times actually, when finally they agreed to talk to the family. And we were told that no charges would be filed, although the original charge was second-degree murder and armed criminal action. He says, due to the fact that there were changing stories from the witnesses and that the suspect and his girlfriend's stories were the most believable. You know, we have a lot of problems with this case and a lot of theories, and we probably will never get the answers to what actually happened, but our biggest problem is the fact that it definitely wasn't self-defense. I think that you can take everybody's statement that was there and pretty much take the similarities and put it together and weed out the rest of it, and you start to get a story, you know? And numerous people are saying that Austin went outside the residence because this man and woman pulled up and they were in a domestic violence situation. One of the witnesses described it as that it was so horrific sounding, like a horror film. And then he describes Austin's wounds later as that he'll never get it out of his mind, the horror that, you know, that he saw with the blood gushing everywhere. And I think what happened here is, you know, this man basically claimed from the beginning that it was self-defense because he says that everybody came out with bats. The problem with the story is that, you know, during his different interviews, I mean, we've got all the files, we've watched his interviews, read the statements, it changes, you know. It was 4 people or 5 people, it was a couple. When they did the evidence, there was 1 bat at the scene. When you put the story together, the bat that was at the scene was actually used by another person that was there after my nephew walked back into the house and they saw that he was bleeding. They state that they then grabbed the bat and went outside. But here's the issue with the whole case. These people are in a vehicle. She's driving. He's in this side. You know, he describes how they're fighting. He tries to grab her and pull her back in. Then he gets out, goes around to the driver's side. He describes in his statement that as he gets out of the vehicle, he gets his knife out. He flips the blade open. He can't tell the officers when they ask him anything my nephew said, anything that he'd done that was threatening. He can't tell them any details about anything. He doesn't know. Well, maybe he didn't have a knife or a bat. Maybe, I thought maybe he did because of how he swung his arm. So you can't tell anybody anything someone said or any actions that they did, or you don't know if they had anything or they didn't. But you're in such fear for your life that you exit a vehicle and you fatally stab my nephew, and that's self-defense? That doesn't make sense to me.
It's confrontation.
You're deliberately going towards someone and creating confrontation.
Using the safety of your vehicle to go towards the
When you
danger
could've-
that's supposedly threatening your life.
No, they asked him, why didn't you just leave? Oh, well, she had the keys. It doesn't matter who had the keys. You were both in the vehicle. You both jumped out of the vehicle. Now, you can tell when you read the statements that they try to compile it all together and act like, oh, well, these people came out with bats and I was afraid they were going to bust out my windshield. Okay, well, you start the car and you leave. That's not what they did. There's a lot of theories that we have behind this case, and we might not be able to prove or disprove any of them, but the main problem we have from the very beginning is that he fled the scene. Her initial story was that she took him to Fast Trip in Sullivan and she dropped him off and he left on foot. She didn't know where he was. She was sure that he'd turn himself in shortly. He made statements in his interviews about how he went to Cuba, to a residence there, to hide. Why do you have to hide if you're innocent? If it's self-defense? Why do you leave the scene? And then what happened was, in one of the officer's statements, he says that he told her, well, we'll be reviewing the Fast Trip footage and different things to make sure that your story is, on the up and up. And then at that point, she started to cry and admitted that that was all a lie, They didn't go to Fast Trip. He didn't get out. None of that. What they did was they fled the scene. He went to some residence in Cuba where they later arrested him, claimed he was gonna turn himself in later. They asked him what clothing he was wearing when all this happened. Well, this is the clothing I was wearing. How do we know? We don't know anything, except that this is what supposedly happened, it's self-defense. Bob Parks tells my sister and all of us when we're sitting there that because all the witnesses' statements were different and changing, and that these are the most believable. What's believable about them? Her initial thing that she did was lie.
But I have a question.
Sounds like the most convenient.
It sounds crazy to me. It don't even make sense. But so someone's dead. He was stabbed. They have the weapon.
He was stabbed. They had the weapon. He admits he stabbed him.
Okay,
He said
so
it was
even if
self-defense.
He stabbed him with a weapon.
Twice.
I mean, if they should file some type of charge.
Exactly, and that was our problem, because when we went,
It's manslaughter. It's voluntary.
I honestly
Something.
was, I was sad about it, but I honestly was expecting them to probably decrease it to something, you know how they do. And that would have upset me, but in no way was I even prepared for him to say there will be no charges filed.
There's something wrong.
And
And
this is
then-
one of many. This is just one story of many
Yeah.
in Franklin County of victims that have
And
no
I've
justice.
made his page. I mean, we've had a page for him for a while, and I've made his page public recently. So there's a lot more to this that you
We're
could
not gonna be able to
You
cover
got a
tonight,
question
right?
go
for this?
on. I mean, I can't really cover it all, but
Questions, Cindy, over there?
yes.
You got a felony going on right out there in the parking lot. A woman's hollering and screaming.
Well, and that was another thing. They asked her that in her statements. They asked her, did you ask for help? Yes. She called for help.
Yeah, she admitted
Okay,
she
she called for help. My nephew went to help her. But now, because she's the mother of his children and he's dead, it's self-defense.
Did they test the alleged perpetrator? Did they test them for drug ingestion?
Nothing.
No.
And that's the other thing.
Yeah,
Bob
it's
Parks
on the
says,
bottom.
Boy that was used in the latest case.
Yeah, that's the problem.
Whether or not they took the drugs and did the crime, or they did the crime and then took the drugs.
well, he admitted in his statements.
In another case, just goes, well, if I just don't even bring charges, then I don't have to do any work.
Right, well, they asked him, and he said in his statements that they did ice and that they smoked marijuana,
That
but yet
morning.
Bob Parks tells us drugs aren't involved. How are they not involved? No fingerprints were taken of the scene. We have questioned about whether the story is even true, whether it even happened like anybody says, because I'll show you the crime scene photos in a minute. The blood outside, little tricklets. But that's where it happened. But he was
Supposedly.
stabbed in his vocal cords. The man even says in his statement that even though he can't describe any, he said, well, did you grapple with each other? No. Well, did he say anything to you? No. He couldn't describe anything he said, any actions. He didn't know if he had anything or not, but he thought maybe he did because of how he swung. So he exits his vehicle. And he fatally stabs him in the throat, but he claims that after he stabbed my nephew, he says, oh, you got me. I don't think so. He didn't say anything. He couldn't talk. I mean, in the forensics report, it talks about how his right upper or left upper lobe, how there was aspiration of blood and hemorrhaging, and you know, he was stabbed right into his vocal cords. The witnesses talk about how the blood was gushing everywhere. The only place you can see that is in the house. Outside, little trickles.
Cindy, isn't there a video somewhere where a cop made a phone call and says, well, we've got your boy?
Well, and that's the other problem, big problem we have with
And
this
that
case.
isn't on the phone record.
Thank you, because I forgot to bring that up.
That is not on the phone
Is
record.
one of the reasons we think nothing's been done with this case is because we think from the very beginning people were saying he's a confidential informant. Well, in the beginning I didn't want to, I was like, whatever, you know. But here's the problem. After we got the stuff, I'm going through everything, she's going through stuff. And you can look all of a sudden, when you look at the booking photos, here's this man that they supposedly arrested for murder and armed criminal action, standing, here's the officer, here he is. He's not cuffed. The officer's got a firearm right there on his side. Okay. And then you see the officer, there's two, with the unlabeled pill bottle of some contents. Nobody mentions anything about nothing. And then one of the officers walks away from the table over to the telephone. I actually hooked it into my husband's amp, and you have to dub it up real loud. And you can hear him say, plain as day, we just sent these prints over on so-and-so, and we might have jumped the gun a little bit. Just tell us what you want us to do.
And
What does
that
that mean?
log's missing.
And then, most recently, this man has been arrested for a weapons charge. You can go to BindLink and find it. It shows you his inmate number. But when you go to Missouri Department of Corrections and you enter that, it pulls up nothing. If you go down on the disclaimer, it'll tell you that reasons why it might not pull it up, and it states local law enforcement might exclude him. So I'm kind of led to believe in that direction, that he might be an informant. You know, he might be being protected. That might be why Bob Parks doesn't want to mess with this case. But it's not right. And, you know, I mean, we're certainly not anti-law enforcement. My mom's whole side of her family is all law enforcement. But Marshfield ways and that direction, yes.
The individual who said we might have jumped the gun and everything, is it conjecture of who he was talking to on the phone?
No, that's what I did. I looked at the time on the video because they supposedly gave us everything, even though there's a lot of blackouts and there's definitely things missing. But I looked at that time, and they did give us a printout of supposedly all the calls that were made in and out of the police station. I tried to go to that time. Doesn't exist. It's not there. I wanted to know, who is he talking to at this time, you know? It's not there.
It's like he was talking on the phone to nobody, is what you're saying.
Mm-hmm.
And see, if you do anything on that, you'll say, well, wait, This is on video here, this particular frame, but it's not on the call record. Well, everybody's not perfect. Maybe somebody failed to write that down. And where's the call record now? Well, they don't know. You have all that we have on the call record.
Well,
That's a lot of blood.
can you see him make the call?
Yes, you can
Yes,
see him.
you see him leave.
You can see it's not from this person.
No, it's a stand, and they're doing his fingerprints and all his booking, and then you see the one with the pill bottle, and they kind of just, you know, look at each other, but nothing's said, and then you see the other one walk away and go over to the far wall and get on the phone. So, this is the story, that it happened outside, that it was a domestic, you know, she asked for help, he came out there, okay. But, these are the crime scene photos. This is in the house.
Is that at the door?
That's inside the living room.
One of the officers even states in his report that there was blood in the house that had been walked through numerous times. He also stated there was a witness there that one of the other witnesses yelled and said, "Don't say anything." Don't say anything about what? It was self-defense, right?
And they put all the witnesses into
Yeah.
a room together alone instead of interviewing them separately right after one was threatened to silence. They put them all in a room together and left them alone.
And then to go and further process the scene, and then the witness there that threatened the other witness, they then determined they should all be driven to the police station and interviewed separately. That's what he said in the report. So what do? They allowed the witness that they named threatening the other one's brother to drive all of them to the Sullivan Police Department. So they're all in the same car and everybody's getting good on what the story is going to be. At the same time that these people fled the scene, and I'm sure they can get a story together, but this is crazy. This is the house. And then later allowed them to clean their own crime scene. I've never heard of such a thing.
Turned it back over to them a couple hours after this happened.
This is outside, obviously, but look, where's the blood? I mean, I see a little trickle right there, but he was stabbed in the throat and they said blood was gushing everywhere.
All inside.
Yeah, in the house. There's even blood right here on this outlet plug-in.
Did anybody call, what did they call the ambulance for? Did anybody call the ambulance for me?
Well, that's the thing too. They said that, the people in the house said that they, had to go next door to, well, they said when they realized how serious my nephew's injuries were, that they tried to put him in the car, but it wouldn't start. Well, first of all, if I saw that much blood, I wouldn't be putting anyone in a car. I would be calling 911.
Well, you would if you were afraid the police were going to bust you for the drugs that you were in.
No, well, then I guess I would run through the house.
Blood on the car, but it doesn't really fit their story.
Yeah. And a big, you know, again, I don't understand the blood on the outlet thing. It's just,
And all the blood on the floor,
there's
there's none on
the
the
one
walls or
batch,
couches.
the only one they found, which coincides with one of the person's statements that says that he went out to, you know, after the fact, but.
Yeah, and where that big puddle of blood is in the living room, it's not on the couch
Only
or
thing
walls
I
or
see
anything else
outside.
around it, it's on the floor. And that wound standing up would have gushed everywhere. Whatever happened there happened while he was on the ground, in the living room, not outside.
Well, you can tell by the, I mean, I don't know, did they put a detective on the scene?
This, what you see, the pictures, is about all they did. They didn't do any fingerprints, they didn't do
They did
any
nothing. And the
investigation.
first responders that came to the scene, the other thing is, this is the other really odd thing. They asked him, would you be surprised if I told you that he was stabbed twice? No, I only stabbed him once. Nobody knows anything about the second wound. The officer even said in his own statement that he didn't notice the second wound until they were loading him onto the stretcher. But yet he described the sound of it. How, I don't know.
Are you
Yes.
sure he was only stabbed twice? Well, because I think what I seen in the living room looked like he was stabbed right there because of the splashes of blood.
That's what we think too.
That came
Yes.
from the knife because.
And you can kind of see like a concentration of blood, and people were saying that prior to this supposed domestic thing that my nephew was on the couch sleeping in the living room,
Which is right next to that puddle of blood.
you know?
They just pulled him off the couch and threw him down.
I think it was an attack,
stabbed
and
him on the
everybody was
ground.
saying at the funeral, even though they wouldn't elaborate, it was a setup, it was a setup of what?
And the whole reason not to press charges is because supposedly Austin was the aggressor who came outside and this was self-defense. That right there proves that is not true. That right there is enough for a trial to be started and fair process. That right there is enough.
The officer, there was a life flight helicopter that was actually on its way, and you can hear it on the audio. He tells them to stand down. He's going to Sullivan, Missouri Baptist.
Who don't even have doctors on.
Why? As soon as he got there, his blood pressure was, what, 70/40? All they were doing was trying to stabilize him to life flighting to Barnes. He could have been there, you know?
Question. This crime scene was processed by Franklin County Sheriff, or was this
Sullivan Police Department.
in the way?
Yeah.
Not even
And
fingerprints
I'm not
done,
trying to be
weapons,
critical,
nothing.
but I mean, come on, how many murders do they handle? You know?
25 handled this thing, you know.
Yeah, I, without being disrespectful, I call them Mayberry people.
Probably enough information there to sue the Sullivan Police Department.
Decision to not prosecute or proceed with charges was on Robert Clark.
That's correct.
Right.
That's
Because
correct.
Sullivan did arrest him
They
with charges.
did arrest him and they charged
it was
him with
handed
those two
over to
charges,
Parks.
but then they handed it over to Robert Parks.
Because they were state charges.
And then he said no charges would be filed.
Why is he still parked?
Well, he is legal, but he needs to answer for
There's
everything
outside,
he's done.
a close-up of the outside.
Yes, and the new prosecutor's gonna get all this stuff on his desk if we can get enough people.
They have to know we're watching.
This is bull.
We have to go to those court trials and show up and make these calls and.
Here's the car that they loaded him into when they realized how serious his injuries were.
And it was self-defense.
And if you look on that
Well,
side,
there's
you
a
can
lot of
see
blood in
the
the car.
You have to,
Yeah, but they say he walked out to the car.
There's a lot of blood in that car.
They say that he walked out to the car and they loaded him.
If he had walked out to the car and got in his own after being stabbed. Well, they put him through the window, you could tell, and then they rolled it up.
yeah.
That window was down.
And you can
That's how
see
the
the
blood
blood
was.
running down on that side.
That window was down.
He shoved him head first.
They shoved him in through the window, because you could tell, because the window, and then they put the window up.
I think they were trying to get rid of him.
Any person off the
I
street.
think that, to be honest, I think that's why they waited so long, and that's the other thing. They claim that they had to go to the neighbors to call 911 because no one had a phone. But the funny thing about it is, that's how my sister got to be at the hospital that night. She's minding her own business, and all of a sudden she gets a text that says, "Your son is dead."
Well, that girl said she, asked for help, called him to come, didn't she?
And
So
in
where's she gonna call?
in the booking video afterwards in the lobby, they're all on their phones. You can see them in videos right after, all sitting on their cell phones.
Using the phones to do that.
Right, right.
Who was the girl that asked for help again? Was it just a random girl that pulled up the drive?
It was his girlfriend.
The man
No,
that
the
stabbed
man that
her.
stabbed
Oh, okay.
And they also had a 2-year-old little girl in the car with them.
Yeah,
When this all went down?
The man who murdered him, his girlfriend, had their 2-year-old car in the girl. Or 2-year-old
no,
girl in
they
the
were
car.
in a red Ford Explorer. This is the car that they tried to load my nephew into taking him to the hospital.
I still think they tried to put it in there.
Well, and here's another real curious thing on the inside of the house. Get back to it.
In the car or in the house?
In the car.
Oh, the guy was in the car?
And all the people, nobody had phones. They did. Looking at video, they all had phones on their police station, but that's what.
It doesn't matter, the one that's.
See, there was little drops there, but that's going to the car. There it is. Closer on the back, right there. That's interesting to me because that's my nephew's handprint in blood.
Yeah, he's trying to get away.
And so I'm not convinced that it didn't happen in the house because
It did.
it took a lot of force to break that sheetrock right there. I mean, and there's blood all over the house,
All over the house. It's everywhere.
but it was self-defense.
I know, wait.
No, it's his ankle.
That's the guy. That died. He's trying to get out of there, you know. He's trying to get away. Huh? He's trying to get away.
We'll get some else.
There's no blood outside. There's hands outside. See, that's the next everybody goes.
I mean, it's even in there, in the hot water here, but it's in every room. Like a smear on the bathroom
He's
door.
trying to get.
Like he's, the most concentration is right there by the living room couch.
I actually have all this, but I didn't maybe look at all of it.
So, I mean,
What I am seeing right now,
but I appreciate everyone's time. I know, you know, like I said, there's no way we can go through everything, but my thing is, we have a lot of theories and we may never be able to prove or disprove them, but the one thing that matters to me is, I think that at least it should have been brought before a grand jury. Let them decide.
And there's no reason.
I would think that it is, yeah.
This one was convinced against her. I mean, same thing in the trial. She did it as well.
See, a lot of us didn't think, I mean, she's,
Positively, because the Allen debacle, that's basically.
well, we knew it was around because we heard it.
What's gonna be the procedure once we get to the process of the attorney?
And then there's
I mean, just like we're interested with Jeff Winehouse's pardon application,
just too much.
what possible constructive means can we do to influence the new prosecuting attorney to reopen this case?
Same thing to make a lot of noise.
That's what I was gonna say. We didn't make noise.
I think,
I was gonna say something.
you know, Jeff was talking about occupy the courthouse, and it made the state highway patrol nervous. But I mean, you don't have to go. You can peacefully go in and hang out outside his office, the new prosecutor, whatever. And you know, I know that prosecutors.
Hang out in front of the present prosecuting attorney's office.
No.
I would.
No.
You were screaming at him the other time.
Yeah.
They wouldn't even accept my paperwork. I had to turn the paperwork in to the clerk and have it because they wouldn't even accept my paperwork through the.
Can I get everybody's attention for just
Do you want to?
We're trying to slot here, okay? We're trying to slot here. When we get sense, they have been able to just get a little bit of what he went through with his son, okay? And we will just start, we will call another